and welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker and I coming at you with the expansion draft extravaganza here at Overtime Hockey Talk, and we are going to just jump right in to our mock expansion draft. We're just gonna, Justin and I both have our lists of the players that we think will be taken in this draft. We'll talk about maybe some differing opinions, how the Seattle Kraken are likely to build their team, and maybe some potential moves along the way. Justin, welcome.
Oh, hi. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me for the 226th time, I think is what we're at now.
Just beautiful.
Also, if you hear a little baby, it's because my child is in this room right now. My wife went to the gym, a little later than she should have. So now I'm, gave her a nice plate full of puffs, and she's chowing away. But every now and then she'll let me know how much she enjoys those puffs. I
mean, she's going to let you know if she doesn't like your pick. I'm sure she'll.
That's true.
She'll say something.
That's true. She knows way more than I do. That's saying something. Okay, so as we jump into the expansion draft, just before we start making our picks, how do you see the Seattle Kraken building this team based on the players that are going to be available?
Yeah, I think they're going to target a few things. Personally, I think one of their big, moves is going to be trying to acquire assets that I feel like they can move off at some point this season. I feel like the Kraken are going to have to go about acquiring assets, and what I mean by assets is draft picks a little bit differently than the Golden Knights did. The Knights obviously got lucky, and a lot of teams were willing to, get rid of second, third, first round picks for, Vegas to take player A over player B and so on and so forth. I mean, we saw with, obviously William Karlsson got thrown in on Columbus's deal, and it turned out pretty good for Vegas. And, obviously teams have learned their lessons this time. And so
have they, though?
So some teams have learned the lessons. Let's just put it that way.
Already hearing about teams that are, they don't want to give up this guy, so they're planning on making moves. Like, as far as I know, I don't know. The one thing I think that could be different is that teams will be more likely to trade draft picks, but maybe not players as often.
But what I do think is I don't think they're going to pay as big a price, right? I think obviously Vegas took advantage of some teams, and but on the flip side too, right? Like you talked about, with teams maybe willing or wanting to move players, the big thing that's going to affect that is the fact that we're still going into a flat salary cap year, and so some teams on a budget might look at this and be like, okay, crap, well, we got to do something if we want to be competitive next year, and this is the opportunity. So, personally, I don't see a lot of moves happening. I mean, on my mock draft, I think I only have about 3 trades that are happening here. So, I don't know if you put anything down, but we'll see what happens. And, hey, if there's more than 3, that would be great, because I certainly love the excitement that goes along with a trade to see what happens for sure.
To be honest, I didn't do a whole lot with trades. I kind of looked at this and, some of the players that I picked, I assume that there may be a deal surrounding it. Like, for example, I think there's a chance that they will take Ryan Johansson from Nashville. I think that if that were to happen, they would need to likely pay a price to have them take him.
Sure.
Along with, or I've seen other people's lists include Matt Duchene as the player that they take, which would definitely need to have some kind of draft pick attached to it. Likely a first round pick. I mean, you think about what the Leafs had to pay just to give up Patrick Marleau's 1 year left on his salary at like $6 million. And Matt Duchene's got a few years after that for a higher cap hit. So I don't know all what they'd have to give up to get Seattle to take one of those guys. I think it'd be an easier pill to swallow with Johansson because his deal isn't as long, but at the same time, do you look at Duchene and say, we actually could revitalize this guy, whereas maybe Ryan Johansson's a little too old?
Yeah, well, I think regardless, the one thing to keep in mind is Ron Francis has gotten permission from Seattle's ownership to go spend to the cap, to the top. So that might signal some trades coming to pick up some salary.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and can they go out and see, the way that I'd play this is, if I can spend to the cap, I'm spending to the cap. I will take on players who have an inflated salary. I want assets as well in return if I'm going to take those, but I'm only going to take guys who I think can actually play. I'm not taking I think that, didn't Vegas take David Clarkson from Columbus?
Yes.
I think they did that to take that dollar amount away. I wouldn't do that. I would only take guys who I can actually put onto the ice. So that definitely plays a little bit of a factor into the team that I picked. I say we jump in.
Let's do it.
Shall we do this just in like an alphabetical order? Kind of like we'll start with Anaheim and move on through, or do you have yours in a different type of way? Do you have yours by position?
Nope, I went alphabetical. So
beautiful. Look at that. Through. We didn't actually talk about that. Probably should have, but we didn't, and it ends up working out. Okay, well, let's start with the Anaheim Ducks. Who do you have going from the Ducks?
Yeah, so first off, I'm going to tease you a little bit. As far as my team goes, I've got 16 forwards, 10 defensemen, 4 goalies, and I'm spending $74.1 million against the cap. So with that said, the first player I have going from the Anaheim Mighty Ducks is Alexander Volkov.
Okay.
23-year-old winger. He's an RFA for this year, so he'll need a new contract. But looking at the players they have available, I just honestly I like the youth there. I like the potential that he brings, and so maybe Seattle takes a chance and hope that he blossoms into something good.
Yeah, I went with the Volkov. He's all right. Like he's done well in the AHL. Hasn't done anything in the NHL of yet. Certainly could be a diamond in the rough. The way that Adam Henrique played at the World Championships, I know that he's making a lot. I think there's a chance that Anaheim might be willing to toss something Seattle's way to take him because of his contract. But I see Adam Henrique going to Seattle and being a real nice piece. You look at what Tampa Bay had to do to win the Cup. They needed that third line. And I know we're talking about an expansion team here, but Adam Henrique can play up in your lineup, but he can slot into a third line. He can play center. He could also play on that second line, and he will do all the things that you need from a guy like Adam Henrique. Yes, he will make $5.8 million for another 3 years, which will put him at 34. But I think that you can probably, you can work around that. Maybe there's just a deal to be had with Anaheim, like, hey, we'll toss in some other player. I think that they're going to want to hold on to Volkov because of his potential. They're going to leave Henrique exposed, and to me, that's I guess the only other in my list, the only other player that they could take or that they might not expose would be like a Sonny Milano, but I don't think you don't want a Sonny Milano. You want somebody who can make an impact, and I think that's Adam Henrique. You need some leaders in that locker room. He would be one, and after his World Championship, he led that Team Canada to a gold and was phenomenal. So,
yeah, I don't hate that pick because, let me just tell you, I think there's going to be a few top-name centers available as far as the expansion draft goes, and so centers are at a premium at free agency as well. So,
that's exactly
wouldn't be bad for them to listen.
You've got a center that he can play. Like, he could score you 20 goals still. I think that he's still capable. And you know what? You take a guy who's a little bit older. Are you willing to deal with what you got to deal with in 3 years when maybe he's not as good and you maybe have to, get creative? But also the salary cap will go up. It's likely the salary cap will increase significantly, I think, once we're kind of out of all this crap. So okay, there's our Anaheim picks. Who do you have going from the Arizona Coyotes? I feel like there's only one player to go. So you tell me who you have.
Yeah, first goalie off the board, Aiden Hill.
Yeah, that's exactly who I have as well. I don't see a player on this team that I even want. The only thing that I could potentially see is, like a Phil Kessel trade, which he'd obviously have to agree to. But I could see Phil Kessel being open to being traded if they really, for some reason, don't want to lose Aiden Hill and they know they're going to trade Kessel anyways. Maybe they can work out something where, they just take a UFA and they get Kessel. And I would think that Seattle would actually have to give Arizona an asset back in order to get access to Kessel if he was willing to go there. So there could be some interesting, and Phil Kessel right away, there's your face of your franchise. And the more I thought about that, I think that would be very appealing for a team like Seattle. All the assets you're going to get by squeezing teams to take one of those and flip it for Kessel. That wouldn't be so bad.
Yeah, I mean, if it doesn't cost you maybe just a third rounder on top of it, I would be all aboard for that one.
You wouldn't be willing to give a second round pick for Phil Kessel?
I don't know.
A second round pick, really? For a guy who scored 20 goals in 56 games, he basically scored, he would have been on pace for a 30-goal year, probably close to almost 60 points on a team that could not score.
Well, okay. So I guess maybe the thought process thinking, okay, if I give up the second round pick, him being a UFA next year, you could flip him at the deadline and then get that back. So maybe then, hey, maybe
well, you'd probably get a first round pick for Phil Kessel, is my guess.
Right, and maybe it works out and he does very, very well. And like you say, you get a first rounder or more, or you re-sign him and, everything's jolly for the next couple of years. But I guess at that point, I might be willing to give up a second rounder then.
I feel like that'd be kind of fun. Phil Kessel to the Seattle Kraken. All right, well, that's, and if we're going safe, I'm saying Aiden Hill as well.
Yes.
He's the only player actually unprotected. Phil Kessel can't be unprotected because he is a no-move clause. All right, the Boston Bruins. Who do you have from the Bees?
All right, I got forward Nick Richie going to the Seattle Kraken here. RFA.
Okay.
25-year-old winger. I think this is a kid who, obviously I think, had a lot of potential, just really hasn't worked out between Anaheim and here. And so I think maybe, Seattle's willing to take a chance. And, again, with a lot of the youth, I feel like, Seattle's going to take a lot of younger guys on RFA contracts or, with still deals in place and really, try to hope to revive some careers or at least get them jump started, right? Because, he had some flashes in Anaheim, looked pretty decent. Last year wasn't too bad in Boston, 26 points in 56 games. But I think with the emergence of Krejci and Hall potentially being re-signed, I think, Boston's more than willing to part with a guy like Richie to keep that duo around as far as money's concerned.
Okay, I went a different route. I went Trent Frederick, who was a first-round pick, 29th overall of the Bruins. And I think it was in 2016 or 2015, one of the two.
2015, yep.
2015.
Where they had 3 draft picks in a row in the first round.
Yes, and he was one of them. He hasn't panned out exactly the way that potentially you would hope. Obviously, like this last year, he only had 4 goals. I'm looking at someone who is a first-round pick and obviously has some talent. And I think that he may be given a new situation, a different opportunity, because most nights he was getting 9-10 minutes a game. He's kind of playing more of a shutdown role. So I think maybe he's somebody who you could look at and go, hey, we can get a guy who was taken in the first round, still is only 23 years old, and potentially, if you see something in his game that you like, he's somebody that I think I would rather take some of these projects, which I think they will. They'll go after some guys that maybe aren't because they want to find that diamond in the rough, right? Like you want to find your William Karlssons, you want to find your Jonathan Marchessault, and I know that Marchessault had more success than a Frederick, but you get my gist that you
Sure.
maybe go after the guys who just have fallen short of their potential, and maybe you think you can change that. So, I'm going Trent Frederick.
Beautiful.
Another center as well, which I put a premium on. Let's go Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah, for me, I've got the first ever player to be chosen by 2 different expansion teams, and that's Colin Miller.
Okay.
On defense.
Is it the first ever player?
I feel like he would be.
Did you go back to like the 80s and the 90s when there was a ton of those?
Yeah, I probably should have. But honestly, if anybody out there knows the answer to that, please let us know.
There you
go. But for me, Colin Miller, I think he's still got a lot of potential to be a good middle pairing defenseman. Not to mention he has a right-handed shot, which is definitely a premium. And not only that, but he's, on his last year of his deal. And so, if for whatever reason it's just not a good fit, Seattle decides they don't want to, re-sign him beyond the season, I think he's still a valuable asset at the deadline that I think teams will be willing to pay for.
Yeah, it's too bad that they have to protect Jeff Skinner. That's a tier. I guess so. In the protected list for the Sabres, I guess you're protecting Jokiharju, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and that would expose Colin Miller, obviously. My pick was I actually went with Rasmus Asplund. He scored 7 goals last year in 28 games. It's a 20-goal pace. And so my thought was just maybe there's, they see a guy who can score goals, he's available, and Seattle says, let's go after a guy who has shown that he can score. Colin Miller, we know what he is. You could probably get him cheap too if you just wanted to make a move. And the Sabres, they would love probably to get that money off their deal. It just depends on what other defenseman you happen to take the rest of the draft. But I like a guy who has scored some goals. And maybe you can, there's your William Karlsson potentially, a guy that you can kind of, you see that he was able to score goals, just not given the opportunity, playing on the fourth line, and you give him the right opportunity, put him with the right players, and suddenly he scores you 30 goals. And that's what they're looking for. And I think Asplund potentially has that.
I love it. And centers, again, you're picking them. I love it.
Yeah, and those are the guys that you likely could flip, Right. Teams can never have too many centers, and frankly, you can always move a center to the wing. You can't move as easily a winger to the center position. It's just
disagree.
Not as easy. Okay, let's go Calgary Flames. This is one of those teams where there could be some significant drama surrounding what's going to happen in Calgary. Who do you have going from the Flames?
Yeah, you talked about a drama, right? I think this offseason we're already hearing names like Johnny Gaudreau, Sean Monahan potentially being moved, and so I think this team is due for a facelift. To see a brand new sort of team next season, right? I'm hoping that they do a lot of moves. This would just be right up my alley. But for me, I think Seattle's going to pick Mark Giordano. I think they're going to take that $6.7 million off the books. I don't think Calgary protects him in the draft, and I think they're going to protect Tanev, Anderson, and Noah Hannafin and leave Giordano exposed. And I think again with Seattle, primarily, in my opinion, taking a lot of younger players, are going to be looking for a couple veteran guys to be those leaders in the locker room while they sort of develop this team over the next couple seasons. And for me, Giordano is one of those guys.
In my mind, you can't. If Giordano is left unprotected, you can't not take him.
Right.
Like, you are a moron if you don't take Mark Giordano if he's available. He won the Norris Trophy 2 seasons ago. Or maybe is it 3 now? 3, right?
Yeah,
3 seasons ago. He's still effective. He's 37. Yes, he's a UFA. It's likely you can at least get a second-round pick for him at the deadline if things aren't going well. And even if he's having a bad season, you're still getting a third-round pick for him.
Yeah.
And he's not going to have a bad season. He's going to be effective for you. He'll put up 40, 50 points if given the right power play opportunities. I think that it's a no-brainer to pluck Mark Giordano. And for the Flames, the only thing that I can think of is that they go, there's just no There's not many players that you don't want to protect. Maybe the only way that this doesn't happen is if the Flames, this is what the Flames would have to do. They have to trade, or they have to get rid of Milan Lucic, who has 2 years left on his deal. They have to find somebody who's willing to take him. And then they have to expose, Mangiopan?
Maybe.
And then they can, and then I think they could do it. Well, 3 defensemen, 7 forwards, or 8 total, right? Yeah, so no, you'd still have to leave them exposed. Man, you'd have to. They would probably end up taking Lindholm or There's really no other option. Even when you play around with it, they're going to have to make a trade if they don't want to lose Mark Giordano.
Yeah, I agree.
Or they risk losing Tanev, which you don't want to do. Although Tanev would, Tanev played okay. Maybe instead you expose Tanev and you let them take Chris Tanev, and you just call it good on what he was and what he did. They didn't make the playoffs with him, and if you want to keep Mark Giordano beyond this year, maybe that's what you do. I don't see that happening. It's weird though to think that Giordano could be leaving the Flames this way.
Right.
He's kind of the James Neal of this expansion.
Oh no, he's the Marc-Andre Fleury, in my opinion, right?
I don't know, because
he's the guy, a potential face of the franchise type player, and say goodbye. But
Marc-Andre Fleury wasn't a free agent at the end of the year, was he? He wasn't.
No,
he wasn't a UFA.
No, he still had term on his deal, but similar though. It's a leader, right? It's one of your top guys that you're just looking to make a change, and you're saying thanks, but see you later.
Yeah, all right, I'll bite. But if he's exposed, he's gone. No doubt.
Yes.
No doubt. Let's go Carolina Hurricanes.
All right. I've got another defenseman going and another big name, and that's Brady Shay.
Yeah. I've messed around with the Hurricanes a good amount, and I can't find a way not to have Brady Shay exposed. So, yeah, I mean, the only other guy that you could potentially take would be Nino Niederreiter, which I think they would expose Niederreiter. But with him being a UFA at the end of the year, it makes a lot of sense to take Brady Shay. Maybe your best defenseman that you can get outside of Mark Giordano.
Yeah, absolutely. I do not disagree with that. I think because the problem is, you've got Brett Pesce, Slavin. You're obviously going to protect, and you have to protect some youth and Jake Bean, because I feel like he's still an asset to this team. And, between Gardner and Brady Shay and the amount of forwards that, Carolina has that obviously they're going to want to protect, I just think, you gotta leave one of those guys exposed, and it's going to be, unfortunately, Brady Shay. So see you later. Thanks for coming from New York, but we'll see you. I mean,
the other side of this is they could go out and make a move and make a deal with Seattle, which, in which case you could maybe say, hey, we'll give you Jake Gardner, which not a bad flip either. What about Jake Gardner and Nino Niederreiter? If that was the deal, hey, we'll let you take both of them.
Now, I feel
is it worth it to you to keep Shea and give up those two guys?
I feel like if you want to throw in a name, maybe throw in a Warren Fogle, right?
Yeah, but they could just unprotect Warren Fogle, right?
Or maybe a Morgan Geekie, right? You leave him exposed, or you throw him in the package there, and you say, hey, let's throw him in there.
Well, I think he'll be unexposed anyways.
Likely, I think between him and Fogle, it'll be one of the two guys will be left in the forward group. But
I think I saw one mock draft where Svechnikov.
Or
maybe it was Jake Gardner was dealt to the wings for Evgeny Svechnikov, and so then they had that. That was some looked at tons of mock drafts too before this, but yeah, it's going to depend on how. If they expose Brady Shay, he's gone, unless they're willing to toss picks their way.
Yeah, and you got a guy who's been in a top 2 spot before, and at $5.2 million. I mean, if he can recapture some of that New York magic, it's worth it.
Yeah, and 3 years left on the deal, so he's cost controlled too. Okay, let's go the Chicago Blackhawks. I feel like there's not a whole lot here with the Blackhawks. I went with the defensive side because I think that you can flip these guys. I went with Calvin DeHaan.
Okay, yeah, I went defense too, but I took a younger guy that they're going to unfortunately leave exposed, and that's a Riley Stillman.
Okay. See, I actually have them protecting Riley Stillman.
Okay. Yeah, I don't hate that move at all. And I was torn between Calvin DeHaan and Riley Stillman as far as who they would protect. And
see, and I think they're going to protect Riley, 23-year-old over the 30-year-old who's a UFA.
The other thing to consider is too. I mean, we talked about it earlier, but obviously Caleb Jones for Duncan Keith. That trade happening now. Caleb Jones, you have to either leave him, exposed, or you have to protect him. And so, where does Chicago value a guy like Caleb Jones? Do they think he's worth protecting over a guy like Riley Stillman or Calvin DeHaan at this point?
That is also true. I have Caleb Jones protected. So I have Zadorov, Jones, and Stillman protected. I have Murphy and DeHaan unprotected on the defensive side.
Okay. Yeah, I left Connor Murphy protected, but Stillman and DeHaan exposed.
Okay. Yeah, see, I would think if I'm Chicago, I'm going, all right, they can only take one. And both these guys, Murphy and DeHaan, are free agents. So we'll lose the free agent over all these guys that are RFAs. So I think it's likely that they'll expose the guys who are UFAs at the end of the year. But we'll see.
That's fair.
We'll see what they do. Okay, let's go Colorado Avalanche. This one's fun. A lot of good players that are sitting there. Who do you have going? And they don't have to protect Landeskog. That's a nice perk. No Landeskog, no Brendan Saad, who I don't think will be back, but nevertheless, they don't have to protect Gabriel Landeskog unless they are funny and sign him before the expansion draft. I don't see that happening. But who do you have going from Colorado?
Yeah, this one was pretty tough. There wasn't, as far as, guys to leave exposed, there was really only one guy at the forward group, and that's JT Compher, right? And then you can look on the back end and say that there's some defensemen here. And honestly, I think, between, when you look at the defense, right, Eric Johnson has to be protected. Then you got Samuel Girard and Cale Makar. So to me, that leaves both Ryan Graves and Devin Taves exposed. And I think between the two of those guys, I'm taking Devin Taves all day long.
Yeah, so I actually have Colorado protecting. They have to protect Eric Johnson, Samuel Girard, Devin Taves, Ryan Graves, and Cale Makar. I have them protecting those 5 defensemen. So the only forwards that I have them protecting Mikko Rantanen, Nathan McKinnon, and Tyson Jost.
Okay.
I think that they're going to leave Nazem Kadri exposed, and they're going to dangle that carrot. Nazem Kadri's a free agent at the end of next year. Jonas Donskoy is a free agent in 2 years, and I think that they might dangle those carrots and say, go ahead and take them, because Seattle might just sneak up a Nazem Kadri who would likely become their number 1 center. I know he's a UFA at the end of the year. I know he's had some issues getting suspended in the playoffs, but the goal is to get to the playoffs. And with Kadri, you have a good chance of getting to the playoffs. He is probably the only legitimate player who could play a number 1 center position for Seattle, outside of course, making a crazy acquisition. But in terms of this expansion draft, it's either him or maybe what Nashville can give. But I'll take Nazem Kadri over Ryan Johansson any day.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all right now. Yep.
And I got to think that maybe Colorado's looking at him and going, dude, you cost us. Just like the Leafs. Dude, you cost us. and maybe Seattle doesn't care because all they care about is getting to the playoffs right now.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one.
If they left him exposed, would you take Nazem Kadri if you're Seattle?
Yeah, probably. So if they don't go and protect a massive amount of defensemen, right? If if Taves is still there for me, I obviously want him over Kadri. But at this point, yeah, if Taves is protective and Kadri's available, sure, because he's still a potential 30 goal scorer, right? I mean, he's just a couple seasons removed from that, so he definitely has the potential to still score some goals. And who knows, he might be your William Karlsson, the guy that just magically puts up 40 goals if he's the number one guy on that team.
Hey, I mean, he's put up 30 before. I mean, he puts up 20 almost every year, so I think he has put up 20 every year outside of these potentially shortened seasons. But yeah, I'm going on some Kadri. I think that would be a great move. Yeah, I guess he had only 11 goals this last year in 56 games, but so not quite on the 20 goal pace, or maybe right around 20 goals. But he really struggled early on with Colorado, and his shooting percentage was the lowest it's ever been in his entire career since his rookie year with the Leafs.
Wow.
So you can look at that and probably go, I mean, the year before that, he was shot 14.3%. This last year, 6.5. So he wasn't even at league average. Something was going on. I think that he can move somewhere else and find what he needs, and that would be, I think it'd be fun to see. You always, I want to see this team be good. I want to see the Kraken be a decent team, and I think with Kadri, they could be. Okay, let's keep on rolling. Let's go the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Okay, for me, I've got a left winger by the name of Eric Robinson.
I have Eric Robinson as well.
Yeah, I think, honestly, there's not a lot of good options here. If I'm looking at this team, obviously, they're going to protect Jones, who they're likely going to trade at some point, Werenski, Garinkov, and then, of course, you've got on the forward group Atkinson, Nyquist, Domi, Laine, Boone Jenner, Bjorkstrand, and Jack Roslovic. So really, that's just process of elimination. There's really not a whole other lot of good pieces to take. So
I mean, I guess the other thing that could happen is they don't protect Nyquist, who didn't play at all last year, and they protect Eric Robinson because they think that he can be decent, and maybe I think that they would be happy to get rid of Gus Nyquist. I think that they could move on from him. He would be a good piece in Seattle. He's still probably can do something for them. And maybe Columbus is willing to, I don't know, eat some of the salary or what have you, if maybe Eric Robinson goes along with Gus Nyquist, and you make that a part of the deal, and then they're not as cash strapped, and they can more easily sign Zach Werenski and do everything that they need to do to keep him. And knowing you're going to trade Seth Jones, you're going to probably bring in some other talent, and that's going to cost money as well. So it could be to their benefit to get Gus Nyquist out of there. And if you're Seattle, he's a proven talent. He's only 31. He could still probably put up 35, 40 points in the right situation. So he may be worth having.
Yeah, I agree. He's still a valuable player.
Okay, let's go Dallas Stars. Who do you have from the Stars?
All right, this one's going to be interesting to me because I think there's a couple things that are going to happen here. I think, one, we're going to see an actual UFA get taken here, and I say that because I feel like Dallas is going to package some picks here to get Anton Khudobin protected. I know the obvious pick for a lot of people is to take Doobie here, but I think Dallas is going to get creative and find a way to keep him because Ben Bishop, with the injury history there, I don't think he's going to be effective. And unfortunately, he's got a no movement clause. He's probably not going to waive for them. And, you've got that rookie goaltender there that I don't think they're going to, Ottinger. I don't think they're going to rely on him to be the number one guy. So Olesiak, I think Jamie Olesiak is going to be the guy that ultimately gets chosen and, gets some picks that go back the other way. Now he might decide not to re-sign in Seattle and might end up right back in Dallas. So who knows?
Yeah, I think if I'm Seattle, I am not going to help Dallas out because I don't think that Dallas can pay me enough to not take Khudobin. Now, if Ben Bishop is willing to waive his no move to go to Seattle, I would probably consider him. I think that he is probably the more talented goalie, and if he's healthy, and you can give him some other goaltenders around him where, again, he gets to play 41 games. I like my chances come playoff time, but yeah, he is really always hurt. It's hard to want to take Ben Bishop. But I mean, they could put together a really nice package. But in my mind, I think I'm just taking, he's my number one goalie. Dallas is gifting me a number one goalie.
Yeah, I've got a couple other goaltenders that I think Dallas or that Seattle's going to take that I think they probably have in mind to be their number one, and I think they'll pass on an older goaltender in Khudobin who looked fine last year, but not quite his playoff Stanley Cup run form per se.
Yeah, but can you at the same time, this last year was weird for a lot of people, especially the Dallas Stars. They had such a weird start to their year. I'm willing to say he gets a pass. Also, yes, he's 33 years old, but he wasn't a starter. Like he hasn't played the bulk of games that some guys who have been a starter since they were 25 will have played up to this point. Like a 33-year-old Frederik Andersen would be have a much different wear and tear on his body than a 33-year-old Anton Khudobin.
Understandable.
In my mind, I'm taking Khudobin. I do have other goaltenders that I think could potentially compete for a top spot, but I think that he's probably the most likely best goaltender that you can get. So let's keep it moving though. Let's go Detroit Red Wings. Who do you think's coming in from your team?
Yeah, I thought about this one, and there's really not a lot to be excited about if you're Seattle as far as what you can pick and what Detroit's going to protect. I know a lot of mock drafts I looked at had Evgeny Svechnikov, being taken, but most people don't realize, and at least I'm going off cap friendly, so excuse me if I'm getting it wrong, but he is 6 games short required to meet the exposure requirements, so he can't be taken as far as I'm concerned. So for me, I think honestly another UFA is going to get chosen, and Detroit doesn't pay a single thing. I think that they look at the center position and look at Luke Glendening, the best face-off guy in the NHL, a great penalty killer, and think, hey, let's pick this guy. Maybe we can convince him and give him a lot of money to come play a couple of years here with us.
Isn't he a UFA?
He is a UFA, yes. That's why I said he'll be the only UFA that they voluntarily pick, I feel like, out of this entire draft.
I mean, I would rather go and take, an Adam Earn. I don't know. I don't know if they'd be willing to take that UFA, or you potentially a Christian Juice. Do you think that the Wings are going to protect him, or Troy Stecher?
So I have the Detroit Red Wings on defense protecting Troy Stecher, Cholowski, and Philip Roenick, and they're going to leave Christian Juice exposed, which I did consider. I do think he could be a potential pick for them. But on the forward group, I have them protecting Dylan Larkin, Bertuzzi, Vrana, Fabry, Nemestikov, Adam Ernie, and Michael Rasmussen. Honestly, there's not much for them to pick as far as players go. It's either Christian Juice or maybe a UFA from Detroit. So.
Yeah, I think I'm taking Christian Juice if I'm Seattle, because I know he's a fifth defenseman. I think that's about where he slots. But you need those guys. You need somebody who can slot into your bottom pairing. And you don't want to have him in your top 4, but if you had injuries, he's not the worst guy to have to move up in the lineup. And he's cheap, cost controlled. He has a couple years left before he's a UFA after, depending how long the deal is that he signs. I think that I'm going Christian Juice.
Okay, yeah, I don't hate it because that was pretty much my 1A, 1B choice there. Love it.
Okay, the Edmonton Oilers. Who do you have going from the Oil?
Yeah, I think if they can swing it, I think they're going to try to trade James Neal here to clear some cap space. Obviously, I think the option for them will be to buy James Neal out if for some reason he doesn't get taken or they can't convince Seattle to take him for, not too much. But, we've seen what Kenny Holland's willing to deal to bring in players. And, obviously I think they could potentially move a future pick out. But, if they could clear that $5 million in cap space, 5.75, that would go a long way in helping them get, Adam Larson re-signed and trying to find themselves a top 6 winger, which I keep hearing Zach Hyman's name attached to, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I think, so for the Oilers, now obviously Duncan Keith is protected, Darnell Nurse, Oscar Klefbom, and I'm on the fence about Ethan Bear.
Well, let me just point this out. I think Klefbom, it's come out that he's not likely going to play next season because of the injury, and I believe because he's injured, he won't have to be protected. So, correct. I mean, obviously, correct me if I'm wrong. So I think that helps Ethan Bear's case because he'll get protected at that point.
He's certainly protected.
Yeah.
And then, are you? I guess that really does leave.
I mean, you could go after a Kyle Turris, perhaps. If you maybe want some speed and a guy who had flashes at one point, or a Josh Archibald, but really there's not a whole lot else on this team as far as
because you're for sure. I guess at that point, you're going to protect. You're going to protect everybody else that's sitting there. If you're only protecting 3 defensemen, then you can protect 7 of your forwards. I guess if they left like a Devon Shore out there, Devon Shore is not a bad cheap option for your fourth line if you're building a fourth line here. There's only one other, like, you're going to obviously expose James Neal, and maybe you say, we like Josh Archibald, we're going to keep him around. I'm wondering if there's a world that exists where the Oilers go, Zach Kassian a little pricey. If we can't get rid of James Neal, maybe we can ditch on Kassian. Like, is Kassian really bringing you the value at $3.2 million? I know that he kind of brings those intangibles. I mean, this past year he only played 27 games. He only had 5 points. So even in a full season, if he played all year long, you're looking at a 6-goal, 15-point season. He did not have a good year. and frankly, I mean, the only reason why he had good years in the past is because of who he got to play with, excuse me.
Sure.
I think maybe they leave Kassian exposed. And Seattle might look at him and go, hey, there's a player who, especially after what Tampa Bay showed you need on a third line, maybe they're willing to bite and take away that salary, and then they buy out James Neal with the rest. And that's a possibility for the Edmonton Oilers as well. So I had a hard time with the Oilers as to who they would end up taking. I know that I've seen Josh Archibald on some and Tyler Benson, but I think if they can sneak somebody who has proven that he can play with, like, protect guys, I think that maybe would be something they'd be willing to go after, and he'd fight a little bit. There is an entertainment portion. You don't know if your team's going to make the playoffs if you're Seattle, so you do kind of need those guys who can throw their body around and entertain as well, and Kassian definitely does that. So we'll see who they in the end decide to leave exposed, but I could see Kassian being an interesting piece if they chose not to expose him. I don't know how McDavid would feel about it, or Draisaitl. They might be upset. Okay, let's go Florida Panthers.
Yeah, this is another team. I had a real difficulty, deciding who to protect here and who not to protect. At least when it came to the forward group, right? I mean, I think obviously you've got to protect Keith Yandel, Aaron Ekblad, Mackenzie Weegar, but outside of that, the defense, I'm not really excited about any of those picks. But when I look at this group here for the forward group for the Florida Panthers, really, it came down to 2 names for me, and I think honestly, it's either Nola Achari or Anthony Duclair, right? To me, I got stuck between those 2 guys. Which one am I protecting? Which one am I leaving exposed? To me, I think Anthony Duclair is the better choice to protect. And so Nola Achari for me is a guy who has shown flashes before that he can be a decent middle 6 guy, particularly on the third line, I think is where he does the most damage. But, obviously with a guy like Duclair who ripped it up last year for Florida, you got to protect him as your last basically protection slot out of all their forward groups. And so that leaves Achari exposed for me.
Yeah, Achari's not a bad pick. I mean, Carter Verhaeghe even would be if you're. I'm assuming that they're going to have to leave him unprotected unless there's just too many defensemen. I have 4 defensemen protected for the Panthers.
Do you? Who's your
Ekblad, Yandel, Mackenzie Weegar, and Nudivara.
Oh, okay, fair. Yeah,
that's a hard. I mean, it's a hard balance. At the same time, when you're the Panthers, you look down the rest of the organization, and do you really want to lose one of those defensemen? I mean, can you bring back Brandon Montour? Sure, but there's no guarantees. A UFA, I guess, if internally you're going to bring him back, you're less concerned about Nudivara, and you can leave him exposed. But
yeah, it's tough. There's going to be some decisions that have to be made, and obviously, it's tougher for me as I guess a guy doing a mock draft to go 4-4 or protect more defensemen than just the 3. So,
would you be willing to? I mean, Patrick Hornqvist might be exposed there.
Yeah, that could be a potential fit, but I just think, at a salary and his age, I think he's just better off staying where he is, and I think Florida really likes what he brings to the table. The one interesting piece, though, that I really like, that I've seen in a couple expansion drafts that I think could be a curveball, could be a UFA Chris Traeger. Maybe they bring him out, wine and dine him for, a couple weeks there before free agency and see if they can't get him to sign on long term because, maybe they, even though I have a couple other goaltenders on my list that I think could be potential number ones for Seattle, maybe they feel like this is the guy that's going to be there longer than, these other goaltenders that I've selected. So they maybe think, okay, let's just take our shot now while we get an opportunity before he hits the market.
Here's one other thought. The Florida Panthers tell Keith Yandel, we would like you to waive your no move clause. And he says, sure, I'll move my no move clause because I'm clearly not wanted here, and Seattle, I'm sure, would love to have him. And yes, he has 2 years left on his deal. He is 34 years old, but I think that you could find if things weren't working out and you needed to deal him. I think you could even deal him at the deadline with that 1 extra year, and you could get creative and flip him for a first. If he has even a halfway decent year where he's got 40 points at the deadline or 30 points at the deadline, somebody would give you a first round pick for Keith Yandel because he could come into your top 4 and do some damage on even if he's only on the second power play unit. He could make that second power play unit much more dangerous. I think that's the one wild card that could happen is if Florida's willing to do that. Now, does Florida say, well, we are going to deal him, but we aren't willing to just lose him for nothing? And that could be the other portion of that.
Yeah, because I do think, again, he still has a lot of offensive abilities and he still has wheels to burn. So for me, I think if I'm Florida, I'm holding on to him and then I'm trying to deal him before the draft to try to move him because, again, I'm sure Florida thinks that they can probably still get something good. Even if it's a second or third round pick, I still think, that's worth holding on to.
But, I mean, if you could get a third round pick for him, that's fair. But I think you could also get a third, would you rather lose him or someone else? Is it worth that potential of flipping him later, especially because he has a no move clause? He's not going to make it easy on you to move him either. So, and if Taylor Hall only went for a third round pick, then who knows what Yandel will go for.
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep on cruising. The Los Angeles Kings. What do you have going from the Kings?
Yeah, I've got a RFA winger leaving, and that's Austin Wagner. I think, I think looking at Seattle's forward group here, I think there is a potential that Dustin Brown is left unexposed. I mean, in my mock, draft here, I left him exposed for Seattle to potentially take, but I think obviously for me, I like Austin Wagner. I think he's got a lot of grit to his game. A young guy, still signed to a contract, and it's he'll be an RFA soon. So, for me, he's the pick right now.
Okay, I was leaning there. That is a likely pick. I don't hate the idea of Dustin Brown going there. If he's exposed, depending on the other salaried players that they bring in, I could see Dustin Brown going. I mean, he can still do things. And if you have, I talked about the Anaheim Ducks taking Adam Henrique. And if they have Adam Henrique and Dustin Brown, scattered throughout your lineup, you've got some good players who can play defensively, who can score some goals, and will absolutely bring you that leadership and heart. And that maybe this team is probably not going to be lacking that because of the players that will be available. And that's one scenario that I could see happening is Dustin Brown is ultimately the player chosen, because I think he will be exposed. I mean, LA would be crazy to protect him. There's no reason to protect him.
Yeah, I think the only reason they do is if Anze Kopitar steps in and says, "Hey, I want him protected." But I mean, if you're
Seattle,
I don't think
matters.
I would take him. But yeah, I agree. I think with this forward group now, the one wild card I could see as far as players being taken, I could see LA trying to make a deal to move Jonathan Quick here because
sure.
We've mentioned Fleury's name a couple times, and this is a guy with a Stanley Cup pedigree, Vezina trophies. So maybe, moving, he rejuvenates his career. And I mean, I highly doubt it. I think Quick, the way he's played, I think he's probably on the downturn, but who knows, maybe he gets a little shot in the arm and still shows up a little bit.
Okay. Let's keep on rolling to the Minnesota Wild.
All right.
So the team with that obviously just bought out Parise and Ryan Suter.
Yeah,
pretty
so
crazy.
Thank their lucky stars, because when I first put this together, I had them getting Matt Dumba for free, or potentially Minnesota basically giving them a first rounder, and saying, please don't take him kind of scenario. But now this opens up a world of possibilities, for Seattle as far as, players to take. And I think for me, if I'm Seattle, I'm taking Cam Talbot right now. I think he's at a very team-friendly deal as far as price.
You think they'll protect Capo Kakinen, yeah?
Yeah, I do, and I think he still can play. And if you get him in a 1A, 1B scenario, obviously I think Talbot is probably your 1B. He would, I think, still succeed in that team. And I think, honestly, where Minnesota's going, they would welcome, maybe getting that extra bit of cap space, especially because Capo Kakinen is going to have to get a new deal after the season. And, he's going to be their future in that.
Okay. Once that move happened, it made them a whole lot less exciting in here, didn't it?
Right.
I could see a sauce like Carson Soucy going. You get that again. Those like bottom pairing defensemen. They can always give you picks later on. I don't know if Cam Talbot has it. He's 34 years old. Plus, he has an extra year left on his deal. I don't think that they'll want that salary. So one other guy I could see them going for, depending on who they end up protecting. If they protect Ryan Hartman or Nick Bjugstad, I could see them taking one or the other. I think based on who I have protected, only one of those players could be protected, and so maybe it's probably Hartman, and they'll leave Bjugstad. And he's a UFA at the end of the year, but Bjugstad, he could, again, just like everybody else, he could probably fetch you a third or fourth round pick. And he plays center. He could play, somewhere in your top 9.
Yeah, and they re-signed him to a 1-year extension just to leave him exposed, right? So that was the whole idea behind that. And
yep.
I think if they don't go after a guy like Cam Talbot, for me, the choice is Nick Bjugstad.
Okay. Let's keep her going to the Montreal Canadiens, the runner-up for the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I've got the goaltending theme on point here, and this is my potential starter for Seattle, and that's Jake Allen. I think he's the guy that's going to walk into Seattle and take the reins, and I think Cam Talbot would be a great 1B complement to Jake Allen, who will get the opportunity to start in Seattle.
I mean, I agree. Yeah, obviously he's exposed. There is no other choice but to expose him. The tough thing for Montreal is, obviously you've got kind of your players that you have to protect, and Jake Evans was really good. Jake Evans could be exposed. He still has another year left on his deal. He's getting $750,000, and he played fantastic for the Canadiens in the playoffs. Brent Kulak will probably be out there, and so will Ben Chariot. So, and the other thing is, what if Jonathan Drouin's exposed?
Now, I did think about that because, like, there's one name out there that I left exposed, and that was Paul Byron. And I think the leadership and
he played so well in the playoffs.
He did. So, maybe Montreal looks at this and says, hey, look how good we played without Jonathan Drouin. He's had some, off-ice issues. He just hasn't really worked out or fit in our lineup. Maybe this is our opportunity to just, cut loose, right, and just say, okay, thanks, but see you later. Because if I'm Seattle and Jonathan Drouin's out there, I'm taking him.
Yeah, absolutely. and that is the thing, though. If you leave Paul Byron exposed, you can't not protect Drouin, I don't think.
Right.
Paul Byron gets exposed. They probably don't take him because he's $3.4 million. He doesn't bring you a whole lot of offense. He's not an exciting player. You're probably more leaning towards, if you don't take Jake Allen, you're probably going to take Chariot or Kulak.
Yeah, but I might even go Jake Evans at that point.
But I have heard that Montreal wants to protect their top four. So
interesting.
That's the other. I don't see how they do it, and if they do, then they're leaving exposed.
Yeah, and I think if
that's their pick.
Yeah, I don't mind that either.
If he's exposed, he'll probably go. Like he didn't have the best year with Devils last year, but you're willing to take a chance on him because you know that when he was played with the right players, he could score 20 goals, no problem.
Right.
Okay, the New York Islanders. Who do you have going from the island?
Yeah, I'm staying with the forward group, and I've got I've got a Matt Martin getting taken.
Oh, Matt Martin. Okay, you're going
a little bit of a curveball. I really like his fourth line game that he brings, and he always seems to just be in the thick of things when it comes to, when you look at Barry Trotz's type of game that he loves to play, right? He's the type of guy that I think that a lot of guys respect as far as a leader, but he's going to bring you a lot of sandpaper, a lot of grit on that fourth line, chip in some good penalty kill minutes, and I think for $1.5 million, it's worth taking him. I mean, if anything, you can probably deal him again if it doesn't really work out or fit your game, and I think there's a lot of teams that'd be willing to take him for $1.5 million.
Okay, I could see Cal Clutterbuck going. If you're looking for that energy plug. Cal Clutterbuck would be a great player to bring in. And then, do you think that they're, on the defensive side, Nicoletti, Ryan Pulock, Adam Pellich, Scott Mayfield, one of those guys is getting exposed.
Yeah, I think Scott Mayfield, probably the one guy exposed, but I think, I don't know. I think Seattle's going to have a good pick of some top six defensemen, and especially I think they're going to have a lot of third pairing guys that they're going to pick. So yes, hey, there's going to be a lot of teams that'll be willing to make a move and make a deal to get a guy like Scott Mayfield. Even if you want to move him before the draft or at the deadline. But to me, I think Matt Martin's leadership and his grit that he brings on that fourth line, I think is something that a team like Seattle could really use.
Okay. Yeah, I'd say I would rather have Cal Clutterbuck or even Leo Komarov over those guys. Komarov was playing in the top line here and there because of what he was able to bring, and so maybe I think I'd rather have them than Matt Martin. I don't see Matt Martin going just because he's got too many years left on his deal and he's not all that effective. But if you want somebody who can fight, you might go Matt Martin. Okay, let's go to the New York Rangers. They've got 4 players who are auto-protected. Who do you have going from the Rangers?
Yeah, from the Rangers, obviously, right, we talked about those protected players, the forward group. We've got Panarin, Kreider, Zibanejad protected. Then I've got them protecting Ryan Strome, Buchnevich, Philip Scheitel, and Brett Howden. So for me, it's just leaving a couple guys exposed, and I think they ultimately take Colin Blackwell. I don't think there's a lot on this team as far as players that excite me on either the defensive or offensive side. So to me, Colin Blackwell is the obvious pick. It's just a centerman signed to a minimum deal that I think again you can flip at the deadline, you can flip at any point, and teams will always welcome depth at the center position.
Yeah, I think the one guy that could go would be Brett Howden if they're willing to expose him. He'd be the other the one other guy that I could see them taking, depending on who the Rangers want to protect on their back end. They want to protect Ryan Lindgren. They're going to have to, leave certain players exposed. So that's just they're up against it. They won't lose it. I mean, Brett Howden, he's so far down the lineup too that I could see them kind of working it out. Like, hey, take Brett Howden for us. We'll give you a 4th round pick. Take Brett Howden and give him the fresh start they need. And he's not really doing anything for the Rangers at this point. So I could see him. He was a 1st round pick and had a lot of potential coming out, and maybe a change of scenery would be good for him too.
Okay.
Let's go Ottawa Senators.
Yeah, I have a goaltender getting picked here, but can you guess which one? That's the question. Yeah.
I mean, I suppose. I mean, it doesn't really matter to me who they expose. I think they'll leave Matt Murray open to be taken.
You think so?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I ultimately think that they play the fools and they protect Matt Murray because I think towards the end of the year, he showed some signs of his former self and looked pretty decent, as did this team in general. And so I think they keep him, tied down to this team for a few more years and leave Philip Gustafsson exposed. And I think that's who, Seattle ultimately takes so they can get, that number 3 guy in their organization.
Okay. I think the one other player that will likely be exposed, Chris Tierney, he'd be a great pickup. And
sure.
and again, another center. Like, I know I keep going after the centers, but he'd be a fantastic player to have because he can play. If you need him to go and play all the way up your lineup, he can really play up and down anywhere. And he'll score you goals. He's got some speed. I think Chris Tierney if he's exposed, will be the one taken from Ottawa.
Okay.
All right, Philadelphia Flyers.
Yeah, Flyers. This one was actually, I really enjoyed this pick, and I think it's going to work out better than most people expect. For me, I've got a centerman in the name of Nolan Patrick going to Seattle. Ultimately, we talked about it, right? Jakub Voracek's going to be left exposed in the expansion draft. I think ultimately they will pass on him, although what I will say is he would be a nice, superstar type guy, a guy who had it once before. I think he could still produce and still give. Hey, what I will say is Kenny Holland, go ahead, sign Ryan Suter, Zach Parise like you were planning to do, I don't know how many years ago in Detroit. Yes. So go ahead, bring him on board now.
1 year, $1 million.
There you go.
1 year, $1 million. That would be fun. I mean, those 2 guys are going to be the wild cards because Ryan Suter can still play. Oh, absolutely. He can still play. You put him in a top 4 role, he can still give you 22 minutes a night, no problem. Parise would be a great, third line guy to have, chip in every now and again. And do him like Corey Perry. I mean, I think Montreal did. Yeah. Montreal with Corey Perry, they did exactly what I think people have been like, why do teams feel the need to play players every night? And I think that the Leafs will do the same thing if Joe Thornton comes back.
Sure.
You can't play those guys every night. And if he can give you 50 games in the regular season, in an 82-game season, and then play all playoffs, you want them for the playoffs. That's all you care about. You're getting to the playoffs. So I think that if they can kind of work that, then Parise plays 50 games and you keep him healthy, and come playoff time, he'll probably score you a big goal.
Yep.
All right, Justin, just over an hour.
Beautiful.
We're through. All right. Well, I'll let you go. We will talk to you guys soon. Find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. Looking forward to the expansion draft. Let us know if you agree, disagree, / love all the picks that I make and hated all the picks that Justin made. And we'll be looking forward to all the craziness coming up soon. Talk to you soon.